Hey everyone, welcome back to Citywide Blackout, your home for music, movies, and more. I'm your host, Max Bowen. In this episode, we're introduced to ranchers, supermodels, dead pigs, burro racers, and religious beet farmers. Just a few of the characters in Heather Mateus Sappenfield's new book, Lyrics for Rock Stars. We talk about the different viewpoints in the book, all set in the West, as well as her previous works, and how she evolved as a writer. My next guest, well, she's got a brand new book out, and it is a wonderful collection of stories all centered into the Old West. I am joined by author Heather Mateus Sappenfield for her book, Lyrics for Rock Stars, which I gotta say is one of the coolest book titles I've heard in some time. So kudos on that one. Welcome to the show. Let's dive right in. I am so psyched to talk about this book.
Oh, good, Max. I'm glad you think so. Good.
Now, as I mentioned before, this is a collection of short stories. And how long were you sitting on these? Did these go back years and years, or they're all pretty recently?
Yeah, this collection has been a labor of a little over 20 years now. I wrote the first story shortly after I resigned from my teaching position. I was teaching high school English, and my daughter started talking with the Australian accent of her daycare lady. And I love an Australian accent, but I had a paradigm shift, and I thought, I love teaching, but I'm going to stay home and raise my daughter. And I had always wanted to be a writer anyway. So I started writing short stories and a couple of really terrible novels as well. But so I started writing short stories then. And that first story came then. It was Coloring Beyond the Lines is its form in this collection. And the collection evolved over time. I wrote that story, and then I wrote some others that aren't in the collection, but I kept having near misses with editors at magazines. And I thought, And I eventually went to Pacific University for their MFA in writing program. And I would, an MFA isn't for everybody, but for me, it really changed. I needed it, and it changed my life and my career. And so I wrote altogether, including Coloring Beyond the Lines, which I worked on there. 8 of the stories in the collection are from that program, although they've grown a lot since I graduated too. And then after I graduated, I kept writing short stories because I'd gotten used to doing that in the program, and I was really enjoying them. They're such an art form, such a condensed, concise. They're really hard to write well, and I so appreciate that. I kept writing short stories, and I actually had success with most of the stories in the collection. They got published or won awards or were runner-ups for award. Runners-up? Runner-ups? Runners-up. And so, and then I realized I had a collection one day. I had enough stories for a collection, and I just entered them in several contests, big ones, the heavy ones. The collection was a finalist in all of them, among them the Flannery O'Connor Award. And I thought, whoa, this is pretty cool, but I've also been a bridesmaid a lot here. I must be missing something. So I put it in a drawer, and I wrote 2 young adult novels and published those. And then around my daughter's 21st birthday, I took the whole collection together out of the drawer, and I had grown a lot as a writer, through publishing those young adult books and through raising a daughter, just had grown a lot. And all of a sudden, I could see the stories with new eyes and saw how they all actually worked together. And among them was finding the title and identifying with the story in a way that I hadn't before, the title story. And suddenly everything fell into place. And I went through and revised all the stories again and reordered them and entered the collection again into 2 contests. And it was a finalist in both. And then it ended up winning the V Press Compilation Book Prize. And I was like, yeah, I'll take it. And I've been so happy about that. So, yeah, a long journey. And a lot of growth. Yeah.
quitting your teaching job to go full-time into writing, did you have a plan there, or was it more like just one of those aha moments?
I just sent it, right? And I don't know if I had given myself full permission. It takes a lot to call yourself a writer. I still have some friends who, I dabble in writing, but they can't call themselves a writer necessarily. I had been a journalism major in college, and so I started doing a lot of journalism and writing articles during that time as well. And then I also tutored students. I'm a type of reading specialist as well. So I did all those things to help us get by, to squeak by, because my husband's a teacher too. And so, yeah, I took those steps, and they're scary when you say, okay, I'm seriously a writer now. If it's really your dream, the fear of failure is pretty ominous. And same thing heading for my MFA. What if I'm actually not good enough? What if I can't pull this off? Yeah, I didn't have a plan, though. I just sent it.
Now, you've been doing journalism for a number of years. You've been published in countless magazines. You listed them prior to the interview. I lost count. So many magazines. How does that compare to writing? Is there any real common ground?
Absolutely. I actually, I have a blog, Tread and Edge, on my website that I really enjoy as well. And I think one of the reasons I enjoy journalism is because it reminds me that the ultimate reason I'm writing is to communicate with readers across the board. And so journalism, straight up, you need to get the information out there, and have what's most important up near the top, have a catchy headline, that's going to get interest. And then, you prioritize, and how directly can I get that information out? And so every time I write journalistically, it informs my fiction. As an author, when I'm writing narrative or fiction, I am always motivated by wanting to connect with readers. That is my main motivation. I don't write to create art or for myself, although that is a byproduct. I want to connect with people. I want them to not be able to stop reading something, or to have a spouse say at night, "Are you going to turn off the light? Let's go to bed," or whatever it may be. That's my main motivation.
I get the feeling you were joking a bit, but you mentioned writing 2 terrible novels earlier. I get the feeling you're being a little hard on yourself, all right? I imagine those are 2 awesome books. But I'm curious, how do you think you've evolved as a writer over all these years?
Well, I think I think it's maybe 2 or 3-fold. I think, I've aged, so I've gained a little life experience and perhaps patience and wisdom. I think actually patience may be the main thing that I've learned. And I've learned, now there's a difference between the journalism and the narrative writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And I think when it comes to the narrative, it's the patience. And with that patience comes me setting aside ambition for what I'd like a story or a book to be, and to let the story and the characters evolve in the manner in which they need to. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've quote unquote made it as a writer, or are you still waiting for that magic moment to happen?
Well, I've won some pretty nifty awards, and I've been a Colorado Book Awards finalist. And I have these 2 young adult novels, and now I actually have this short story collection coming out, and it's getting really nice reviews. And then I actually have a middle grade novel that I wrote that was a finalist for the Kraken Prize, and that'll release in spring of 2022. But even at that, writing is such an interesting thing. I don't know that I've made it. I would say that I'm just continuing on the journey and continuing to learn.
What was the hardest lesson you learned as a writer?
Hardest lesson. Well, I'm gonna fess up, Max. 1.5 years ago, I quit writing.
What?
Yes, I quit. And the reason was, I had published those 2 young adult novels. I had a tremendous agent who specialized in young adult and children's fiction. She wanted me to keep producing books like that. And my writing in trying to produce a certain kind of book just fell apart. It just wasn't good anymore. And I just couldn't, I wasn't writing well. I just couldn't produce anything great. And it just felt, and then I lost my agent, and I'd say we parted, it was a good parting. But she should have, left me because I wasn't writing anything very good. And I think what happened was I lost track of my motivation. Everybody writes for their own reasons, right? But my motivation, again, is to connect with readers. And how I seek to do that is by really, really listening to my characters or the narrator of a story, and then writing that story that needs to be told that way. And it doesn't matter if it's an adult book or a middle grade book or whatever it might be. I need to listen to that narrator and to write that story that is addressed, that's coming to me then. So I lost track of that. And, it took losing my agent and stepping away from writing. And I was looking at, should I go back to teaching? What do I want to do? And then I realized, wait a minute, I lost track of why I really write, which is that connection with the reader. And so once I started realizing that, and then making that my priority without any sense of even having a right to the fruits of my labors, so to speak, the voices started in my head again, and everything just started working so much better, even down to how the words flowed on the page, and how honest I was in my own writing with what was going on with me and how it might be getting in the way of the story.
I think in journalism terms, that's called burying the lead, right there.
Yeah.
The fact that you had this moment, you were like, that's it, I'm done, I quit, and then you jump back into it. That's pretty big, because I think a lot of writers go through that. They publish their first book, it sells 20 copies, and they think, well, I guess I'm going to hang it up then. What would be your advice to someone who hits a similar stumbling block where they think, okay, I guess this brings it to a close?
That's a good question. I think everybody's reasons for writing are so individual. So one of my first teachers in my master's program actually had me write sort of a manifesto of a mission statement of why I wanted to be a writer. And now it has definitely evolved into something else. But I would encourage people that are stuck to think about why they really want to be a writer, why they want to write, what is their motivation, and then to take a look if how they're writing and what they're trying to write fits with that goal. And even at that, maybe lower the bar as far as what they're trying to achieve so that there's less pressure on themselves, and then to write true to why they're writing. It might be, I want to write a great mystery novel. That's all I want to do. I want to go through the steps and the fun of, the murder, and all the characters and who done it, and doubt, the investigator doubting him or herself, and then finally, that may be it. Just the process of that might be it, or it might be I'm looking to work out my personal stuff. I'm going to write a memoir, and I'm going to go through working that out, and it just depends on what that motivation is, and being true to that.
Good advice. I like that.
Thank you.
Let's dive back into the book here. We kind of, I think we got a little sidetracked. We're going to get back on course, though. Lyrics for Rock Stars, only recently released. And this book is such a cool story. So this involves a wide range of characters. You have ranchers, cyclists, suffragettes, tourists, supermodels, dead pigs. That's a good one to go with. But I'm curious as to, I guess where the ideas came from for this book, especially where you have such a wide assortment of characters.
Yes. So the ideas come from life, just whatever it is. All right. I'm going to also fess up. So I have mild dyslexia. And yes, yeah, and one of the ways that it manifests is I'm very big picture. And for me, this is probably the opposite of many folks. Stories arrive to me pretty fully formed with the voice of the main character or the narrator. And so probably something in my subconscious or my psyche is working itself out, and then that character arrives. And so literally every story in this collection is generated from something I've seen or experienced or heard about, and then it's sort of, been on the slow cooker until that voice brings it forward, and I know that there's a story there. And then I write it down, I get it out. And yes, so there's so many things from pigs to suffragettes. The suffragettes, I have been a cyclist. I've done all sorts of things in cycling, and I've been, I've got a good body. I've been lucky enough to be able to compete and do some amazing things on my bike. But then I started reading about the women. I don't know where I came across it, but the history of women on bicycles and what a force it was for women's rights and women's evolution of dress and things like that. Okay, I knew about that. I kind of knew about that. But then I realized that some of these women were out riding like 100 miles on these old bicycles. Yes. And, one woman, Dora Reinhardt, she did 20 centuries. Yeah, in 20 days. She rode like 100 miles every day for 20 days. And then Annie Londonderry rode around the world, all the way around the world.
Wait.
Who knew?
How'd she get over the water part?
She had to take a boat, I'm sure. But then once she got on land, she got back on in her little split skirt and her little jacket, and her hat, and rode on.
I would believe that she was badass enough to just ride on the water. She'd be like, screw you, water. Go right over.
Right. So that fascinated me. But then that also, I thought, well, wow. But I know that they faced a lot of resistance, And so that story, evolved and came out about a woman out riding, just wanting to be out, just wanting that freedom and the resistance she might face. So, yeah.
You mentioned having the mild dyslexia.
Yes.
Are there any things you had to learn to sort of overcome it so that you could write, or is it less of an obstacle?
It is a pretty constant obstacle, but I think I've gotten pretty high functioning. In fact, I might be even more efficient than someone else who didn't have dyslexia in the way that I compensate. Does that make sense? So maybe grammatically or in putting words on the page or things, however that might be, I can tend to be so careful because I know that I can mix up letters. I can change the orders of words in the way they For instance, the V Press compilation book prize, I kept saying it wrong, is the book compilation prize. It's just me. I mix those things up too. And, when I'm more tired, it's worse. But book signings are actually, I love being with people and I love signing books, but they're hard for me. I get quite nervous and it's so much work not to transpose the letters and, there's a line of people. So this time I got to have a live book launch last week. I live in Vail, Colorado, and we are lucky enough to be able to have outdoor gatherings. We can have indoor ones too with, I forget the number of people, but outdoor gatherings as well. And there was an amphitheater behind the bookstore in this kind of outdoor shopping area. And it was absolutely gorgeous. There were about a little over 40 people, and they were all spread out they're sitting on rocks, looking down toward the river, and it was tremendous. But then afterward, I signed the books and then actually delivered them because we're a small valley to some of the people, or people could come pick them up. And it was such a relief for me as a dyslexic to be able to sit down in the bookstore with a cup of coffee and just take some time to write out those, inscriptions.
You are the first writer I've spoken to in months who has actually been able to have a live book release event. This is refreshing. This is very refreshing.
I know, right? And people came up to me, we all had our masks on and, we're talking, but they're like, this felt so good to be able to do something like this again. Yeah, we're quite lucky here. Vail was at the top of the charts with New York City initially for the number of cases per capita. We are a destination ski resort, and we had the Burton U.S. Open snowboard competition here. People from around the world, outdoor concerts, people packed in right in end of February, right as COVID began. And then we went, pow, straight to the tops of the charts. And then we're a good community. We worked it out. We did what we needed to do. And then we went all the way back down. And we were at the bottom. And I'm so proud of our community and how we've managed. Yeah.
Now, do you have more book events planned, or do you have to stay virtual for the time being?
Now it's virtual. Yeah, I haven't planned anything else. It's getting to be fall here. It's chilly all of a sudden. It switched this week. So we'll see what happens in the future. But no, I've had some virtual events, but that's all, I felt lucky to have had that much. I'll be with the Mountains and Plains Independent Booksellers Association. They're doing a virtual event this year, and I'll be there talking with booksellers virtually for one of their events.
We've talked about the characters. Now let's talk about the setting.
Yeah.
Every one of the stories in this book set in the West.
Yes.
Why?
It's what I know. It's not only what I know, but I'm passionate about it and I love it. I'm a Colorado native and I've lived in the West all my life, and it just is in my bones. It's just part of who I am, and thus when I write these stories, it's part of what goes on. Setting is, I love finding out things that I didn't know, having lived here all my life too, and then writing that into stories and investigating through that how that would manifest if someone else discovered it too. And history fascinates me because not just physical history, through time, but I think we all have histories, and they're personal histories, there's social histories, there's environmental histories, right? And I think on every single moment that we're alive and breathing, like right now, even talking to you, I'm navigating histories. I'm navigating how I was raised, how I was taught to behave as a woman, what the legacies of history might be moving forward. All those things, we're constantly moving through those and navigating those. And I love looking at that, and setting is hugely important in that too. Who are we within all of these legacies as a person on this day as we're moving along, and then we come into contact with something within the setting. And how does that unfold? And that setting could be an interaction with another person. It could be an interaction with place, something they didn't know or they're discovering. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite character?
No, I don't have a favorite. I think maybe there's two that are standing. I think on a certain day, right? There's something I may identify with some of them more than others. Guns and Lilies, the main character in that just always makes me laugh so hard. She's, a librarian gone bad. And yes, it's just, she always makes me laugh. I wrote her when I was in such an ornery mood. She was so ornery, and I was feeling so ornery, and it was great. And then I really love in The Oldest Living Man in America. I love that old man. The collection is dedicated to my grandfather, who was indeed the oldest living man in America. He was 111. Yes. And so I would always think, wow, the amount of change that he's seen in this country and how much he's learned and evolved over time. It's amazing. And so one day, the main character in that story, Ansel, showed up, and that story almost wrote itself. It was great. Yeah.
How does a librarian go bad? I am just stuck on this.
I can't tell you. Spoilers.
All
but
right.
Let's just say there's a wedding and there's a special dress.
Fair enough. You got to read the book. Simple as that. I want to ask about a line on your website that had me just hooked. I read it. I thought, there's more to this. You write that you are fascinated by the many selves each of us become in our varied roles throughout the day. Some we like and some we do not. Why is that a focus for you?
I think that we have so many, COVID has changed that for us a bit, but we literally have so many roles in our modern lives that we fulfill. Within each of those places, we really have different ways that we act, maybe different ways that we talk. There's the example of a woman who's brushing her teeth in the morning, and she's looking at herself and she's in a grouchy mood, and she kisses her husband goodbye, and they've had a spat, and so she's feeling kind of snarky toward him, or maybe she's feeling kind, and then she gets on the highway and she honks at someone, and flips him the bird, and then she parks and she walks in and straightens her skirt and greets her kindergartners who she's going to guide all day in how to act. Just things like that might go on. It just is an example of the many things we do. And so how do we take all those different places and that we are acting in certain ways and integrate that into one person? That's really, I just feel for people. I think we've got our work cut out for us. And I try to show that actually going on with my characters often, and give readers space to be with the characters in that situation so they can identify and be like, yeah, I know how that feels. I remember doing that. I know how that goes.
You yourself have a lot of different parts: writer, journalist, teacher, parent, wife, many others, I'm sure. How do they all come together?
That I think this is a very good question, Max, because I think you're showing me something today, which is, that moment a year and a half ago when I stopped writing was a time when I was able to integrate those selves, I think, more fully. And I think I got involved with yoga and meditation. I think that helps you settle into a place where you really are with your kind of who you really are. And then when you head into those places where you have all those other faces that you're putting on, you do it from a place of sort of wholeness and centeredness. And then you can feel as though you're not bouncing or pinballing between different roles. You feel centered, I guess. It's a popular word right now. But I think that's how it came together, and I think that's how it also helped me settle into looking at my writing and seeing what was really going on there too.
Given all that you've done with your writing over the years, you published 2 books, you got this new one out, you've been a journalist for many years too. Do you feel like your writing is at a very comfortable spot, or is there more for you to learn?
Oh, there's always so much to learn. Every book has something new to teach me or anyone, really. And I think one of the things that I love about writing, especially narrative, is that at least I know heading in, that I'm going to have some kind of a learning curve about the characters, about how to craft the novel, about myself. Something's going to go on in that process that's going to be hard and that I'm going to have to figure out. And I think that's part of the allure of it, It's interesting, since I've come to this newer place in my writing, it's even changed how I put the words on the page. They're more direct. And when I looked at the story collection and came back to it, I could see where I was writing around emotions. I was writing circles around the things that needed to be said more directly, and learning to put the words more directly on the page. And now when I read books, I can see when authors, some good books, are doing this. They're avoiding where they want to go. And maybe we've all been to this point where you start a novel and it's so good. And then you get about halfway through and you're like, gosh, it isn't panning out for me. And I think that sometimes what's going on is the author isn't going into the hard places with the characters where they needed to go. And we can sense it. It's sort of this implicit thing that goes on in in our reader-writer connection experience. And we kind of sense that, we're not heading in for the deep work.
Do you think the characters are you?
No, but they sure are fun to be with. Absolutely. I think that on some unconscious manifestation level, they're all in some way portions of those many selves, right? Like this is the ultimate of the many selves that I'm talking about. But by the same token, none of them are me, and so I try to be sure to give them the freedom to go where they need to go, not necessarily where I want to guide them to go. And that sometimes means they're headed towards something, and I don't want to stay in this scene. I don't want to have to work this out, and I have to stay sitting right there and do it.
That answer makes me curious. Are you, when it comes to writing, are you a planner or a pantser?
I am a pantser all the way. But here's the deal. So because stories appear so fully formed for me, it's an interesting kind of pantsing, right? It's sort of pretty formed pantsing. But I will, after I've written down and gotten all that worked out and I've got a whole story, I will then plot it all out and see how it's working and draw the map of what I've done. So I would, pants, then plot. Yeah.
Speaking of maps, what's next for you?
Well, I suppose I'll start production on the middle grade novel. But I also just finished an adult humorous novel. And it's parked and idling as I've been bringing this collection into the world and through production with this. And I can't wait to return to it. It's really far along. It's about ready to either head into contests or to look for an agent. I'm not sure where I want to go with it next. But I absolutely love this story. It was so fun to write. It's a 38-year-old woman who, in a moment of crisis, meets an 83-year-old woman. And they forge a really unlikely friendship that leads to a race and a journey and a quest.
I love quests.
Yes. It's a noble quest.
It can be ignoble too, I mean, it can be, a reckless vigilante out for vengeance.
They're kind of reckless, but they're on a noble quest.
That works too. Heather, the other thing I want to ask you about, I do understand this is also out in audiobook format. Who is the voice behind the story?
Well, I've been pinching myself ever since it happened, but one of my absolute favorite audiobook narrators, Michael Crouch, agreed to narrate it, and he is so versatile. You cannot believe it. I mean, this collection has everything from 8-year-old girls to a 109-year-old man, and he's just unbelievable. I was supposed to be listening to it and, listening for mistakes and, things that he might have gotten wrong or something pronounced wrong. And I would literally forget I was listening to the book. I would be in the book. He's so good. So highly, highly recommend. It'll be out shortly on audible.com.
Now, how did you approach Michael? Did you just email him and say, "Hey, I'd like to do the audiobook for my book"?
Well, my publisher asked me, what types of voices are you imagining? Who would you like? And I sent 3 samples, and one of them was Michael. Fat chance that's going to happen. And she contacted him, and he said, "Yeah, I'd love to do it." So, yeah, it's been a dream come true. Yeah.
Well, Heather, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate this. And folks at home, if you want to learn more about the author, get her work, you go to Heather Mateus Sappenfield.
Yes.
Mateus Sappenfield. Links will be in the podcast description. Get her books. Get Lyrics for Rock Stars. Heather, thanks again. This has been a wonderful talk.
Agreed.
This is Angelina Singer, author of the Upper World series, and you're listening to Citywide Blackout, the best podcast for independent artists.
Picture this. You finished your first book and nailed it. The plot, the characters, all the twists and turns. This one's a winner, and all you need is the right cover. If you've got my art skills, this is the part where panic usually sets in. Enter the cover villain, hero to writers everywhere. Founded by noted author Remy Flagg, Cover Villain focuses on composite image covers for science fiction and fantasy writers. Give them the details, and they'll craft a cover using popular trends that everyone will want to see. But wait, you say, I've got ideas of my own. No problem, as Cover Villain loves a good collaboration. As they say, our goal is to put a little villain in every cover we make. Want to know more? Then head to covervillain.com and follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
All right, everyone, that brings the episode to a close. Follow the show on Facebook under Citywide Blackout and Twitter and Instagram under Citywide Max. Listen to the show on Podbean, Spotify, Amazon Music, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, and every Saturday at 10 p.m. on Boston Free Radio. As always, keep those ears open.